assuming that you may be like me. I can feel so exhausted when I lie down and sleep really, really well for a period of time. And then I feel like I'm checking the clock about every hour, hour and a half or so, waking up with things on my mind. And some of the things that I have been thinking lately are, how can I manage all of these expectations that we have before us in the fall 2020 semester? And the question, can I still teach as effectively with all of the things that, all of the protocols that are in place, certainly for our safety. And I'm so happy. And I want to take a moment to say I'm so grateful for everything that everyone has been doing university-wide, or we would not be able to be back on campus with students. So, but it will be somewhat different. So I wanted, as we get started, I want everyone to, if you wouldn't mind, share some of your biggest concerns when it comes to fall 2020 and teaching. And this will be a good way for us to go around and introduce ourselves as well. I always love to see who's on, and if you would like to share what you do, what discipline you teach in, I'd love to hear that as well.
Sure, I'll jump in. My name's Erica Brooks-Hurst. I work at the TLPDC, and I think something that I've continued to hear is like how to keep people engaged in the online classroom. That's one that I feel like I keep hearing, is how to have that active learning work.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Erica.
Mitzi, I'll suggest that one thing that bothers me a little bit and that I rehearse in my head is I'll be teaching face-to-face, and I'll one face-to-face and one online. And I think about my face-to-face class and wonder if there will be confrontations, you know, about the facial covering policy, or about social distancing, or maybe just anxiety-based confrontations. I don't teach anything particularly controversial, but still there's a lot of anxiety that I suspect will seep its way into the classroom.
Absolutely. I've had those same wonders and concerns, Suzanne. Thank you.
I'm Kelly. I'm in the marketing department. I'm with you. It's kind of, even in an online class, I think we're going to see a lot of anxiety. And I know I saw it last spring, so that's still something that's in the back of my mind, is how to create a supportive environment, even in an online class, knowing I think the fall is going to be challenging. I just have that gut feel. So I think they're going to, you know, students are still going to have a lot of challenges that they don't even know yet, and just how to make sure they're supported through that process.
Keely, thank you. I've talked with some of my colleagues recently. Have you all felt like I have in the past week or so, that you have this tension and anxiety and things are bothering you, but you really can't even put a finger on what it is? So when you said that, it made me think, you know, students may not feel very anxious, but really and truly inside really be experiencing that anxiety. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of going along with that as well. Oh, hi, I'm Ashley. Sorry, I'm also in the marketing program. I always forget that part. But what I'm concerned about is this is my very first time teaching, and we're using the breakout rooms in my class. And I guess I'm afraid that I can't really monitor what's going on. I think with so much going on between COVID, the media, the elections coming up. So just, again, like Kelly said, making it a safe space for everyone to feel that they can grow and learn.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley, what are you teaching?
I'm teaching digital marketing.
Okay.
And
great.
Kelly and I are both teaching the same thing.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Hi, I'm Noam. I'm in the English department. And I think I actually share some of Ashley's anxieties, but one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is how I've taught a lot in the past, and though in creative writing, so many of the exercises require in-person dynamic instruction, and I'm really concerned that that won't translate so well into online teaching. And I think one of the bullet points that you have, Mitzi, the difference between emergency remote instruction and online hybrid teaching, is something that I'm really thinking about in the time that we have, how much can I actually make that transition and find all the strategies that will work in an online setting versus, having a long time to actually figure this out and create a course that really focuses on those things.
I so appreciate you sharing that, because I feel that, when we went to emergency remote in the spring, we all wanted to do as well as we possibly could, but there was this feeling of there's grace, because, we're all we've had the rug jerked out from underneath us. But now I feel this pressure inside because of, the pressures that students are feeling to make learning more meaningful, to make the classroom such a safe space, and to be even more effective maybe than I felt I needed to be in the past. So it's a lot of pressure to put on ourselves, isn't it? Thank you. Thanks for being so transparent.
Hi, I'm Emmy Hogan. I'm brand new at Texas Tech, and I'm actually supposed to be at Texas Tech, Costa Rica, but I'm not allowed in the country yet. And Costa Rica is doing everything 100% online just for the whole semester. So that's a whole other level thing. And this is also my first time working at Texas Tech. I just moved from New York, and also first time really using Zoom for classes, because we were using Google Meet back at my previous institution in New York. So having to learn all these new technology things all at the same time at a brand new institution, and also at some point maybe having to move to Costa Rica at the same time, it's going to be just very overwhelming.
Amy, that's a lot. That's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thanks. We're happy you're here temporarily. Well, thank you all. Thanks for being willing to share. And that's it's a great segue into what we're going to be talking about today, because sharing ourselves and the truth about how we're feeling and being transparent is going to be, I think, really key and important to building relationships, whether it be in a face-to-face class, hybrid, or online. I am teaching, I hope, for the whole semester 2 face-to-face classes that are very small at an honors section of a course that has, I just checked, and we're up to, I think the limit is 20, and we're up to 19, and then a Rater Ready section that has 14 students. So it will be a small but mighty team in both classes, and my hope is that we can continue in the face-to-face format all semester long. So myths and truths about teaching face-to-face versus online. I think I've encountered this, and I bet you all have as well. People have a tendency to think, oh, online teaching must be really easy, really flexible, and I find quite the opposite. I've taught at the university level in some capacity since 2001, and not online. Actually, my first experience with distance students was in the early 2000s, when we used to do something called interactive video conference teaching. So I had students there in my classroom in the College of Human Sciences, and then we had students who were remoting in from the Hill Country. So we had Junction, Marble Falls, Fredericksburg campus, and I always sensed in the room when I taught with my face-to-face Lubbock students that they felt frustrated. There were delays, and technology has come quite a long way since then, but there was this sometimes feedback and some delay, and they would feel really impatient, I think, when students were participating. Well, I always, usually in those summer courses, would go down and teach from the remote location back, and I was amazed at how compassionate the Lubbock students were. When I came back, they would say things like, gosh, I sympathize with them. It must be really hard to feel engaged. And wow, there were times that we couldn't hear you and we wanted to say something and we were all talking at the same time. So, building that compassion, I think, is really helpful. And sometimes that can't happen unless you're in that situation where you can actually sense what it's like. But, going back to myths and truths about online teaching. I think to do online distance education well, and certainly emergency remote instruction, it requires a great deal of time and thought and care. And I don't think that is any news to any one of you who's watching today. We're putting in that time and thought and care now. And then all of the what ifs, unknowns, uncharted territories, unprecedented times. I think we're all so fatigued from that, aren't we? I read something, I think on social media this week, that said, I don't know about you all, but I could sure use some precedented times. It would be nice to go back to precedented things. And one more thing before we go on, when we have anxiety, sometimes that anxiety itself causes us to feel more pressure and anxiety. I'll give you an example. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, and they started back to face-to-face classes this week. Our 16-year-old is at Lubbock High, and he happens to be a male, and he started feeling super, super anxious on Friday. So much so, before going back to school on Monday, that I gave our pediatrician a call to see, you know, is there anything you can do? Maybe talk with him on the phone. And he ended up talking to, I was so glad that the nurse on call happened to be a male nurse. When he called, he had a great visit with him, and he shared that he struggles with anxiety, and he gave him some good strategies. And when we hung up the phone, I said, I'm so glad that we had that conversation. And he said, Mom, what can I do to be sure that when I have kids, they don't feel the way I feel, that they're not like me? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I don't want them to feel anxious. This is no fun. And that hurt my heart a little bit because, you know, I'm his mother, obviously, but I think he's a pretty great kid. So for him to feel like, can I do to make sure my kids don't feel, you know, aren't like me? I noted that he feels shame around his anxiety, and that makes me really sad. You know, we're all feeling so anxious right now, and that is certainly nothing for any of us, adults, university students, children and adolescents. None of us should feel shameful about feeling those feelings of anxiety. So, but here's a little bad news, but don't worry, good news is coming. The same fears and anxieties and uncertainties that we're feeling day to day are certainly also being experienced by our students to varying degrees. Suzanne, if you don't mind sharing, I know that you and I've talked about some of our summer school students and some of the struggles that they've had. I think you had a student who had direct experience with the virus in her family. Do you mind just not, of course, not breaking confidentiality, but sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. Yeah, I had a student who started strong this summer and then dropped off, and I got in touch with this individual and said, you know, is everything okay? Is there anything going on? And the first thing that the student said was, I'm taking care of my parents. Both of my parents have the virus. And I was like, oh my goodness, you know, that's quite a bit. And then another email came that said, actually, this means I'm the caretaker for my younger brother. Like, oh, okay. And it just kind of trickled in, this information that the student revealed email by email. And again, the student dropped off, and I checked in again. And then as it turned out, the student had the virus. So, you know, it just, you know how fast a summer session goes. And if you miss a week, good grief. The student missed more than that, really ended up getting an incomplete in the class and missed 3 out of the 4 weeks in either caretaking or being ill. It was overwhelming to me watching from afar.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And I have stories here from summer, but this actually happened in one of my classes during the spring when we went to emergency remote. I had these 2 fabulous face-to-face classes. I felt like just started really, you know, getting into the groove and the good part. And we knew each other pretty well. And I had one student send me an email. It was on a Friday evening. And I thought, gosh, that's odd for a student to be emailing at that time. And she said, it's urgent. Can I please talk to you? And so I called her. Thankfully, I had my office phone at home, and I found out that she had actually just left her home because her father had become violent with her family. And she shared that he had lost his job. There was a lot of stress in their family. And she was on our way to a friend's house in tears and said, I am just, so overwhelmed, and we have an assignment due next week, and I just wanted to let you know. And it really made me think, not only are students dealing with their own anxieties, but the family dynamic in this can be really, really difficult, especially when students are back at home. I hope that we don't end up in that situation again, but just, it made me mindful of the many, many different layers of this. A little more bad news before we get to the good. As much as we all wish things could be normal, typical, I don't think that they will be. Whether we do get to stay on campus all semester long, or things end up changing the way they did so quickly, we'll be dealing with the effects and the trauma, frankly, of the COVID-19 pandemic for quite some time. I know my colleagues and I at the TLPDC really want to maybe dive into some trauma based instructional techniques and talk about that maybe in September and October, because it's something I think we all need to be more mindful of. So know that could be coming in the future. So if those two pieces of news are bad, so then now what? Yay, some good news. We can adapt, certainly. I think we all learned that in the spring, and I hope that you all walked away, as I did, feeling that, it wasn't exactly the way we wanted it to be necessarily, but I think it went as well in most cases as it possibly could go. We've heard this, and it almost sounds trite now, but I still believe it's true. We are in this together. I have felt that so strongly as a Red Raider family and community, that we are all in this together. And we know that we can do this in spite of big challenges. So the great news is strong, effective teaching techniques translate across modalities. And if you all have never had the opportunity to hear Dr. Suzanne Tapp talk about the TILT model, I hope that you will be able to. That transparency in teaching and learning, that is true and universal, regardless of the modality that you're teaching or what type of times, precedented or unprecedented, that we're teaching in. Active learning techniques are still important and effective, and we'll talk about how maybe we can do that in an online or hybrid environment. Clear communication is still so very important, and then setting those high standards and expectations. And when I say that, I don't mean that we're going to set the standards so high that we're insensitive to what students are going through, but students still need to feel that they can focus on things that are important, and they still need to have that high set of standards and expectations. As we were talking about, allowing our vulnerability, authenticity, and care for our topic and our students and how successful they are to shine through makes such a big difference and goes such a long way. We were at the new faculty orientation yesterday, and we heard many of our university administrators talk about the importance and the key role that faculty, instructors, GPTIs play in the way students feel and their perceptions of Texas Tech. It has a huge impact on student success and also retention. And when you speak, they all said too, when you speak to alumni, that's something that they remember, not necessarily experiences or topics, but professors, instructors, relationships that they build here at Texas Tech. That's one of the things that I think makes us really special and unique in a way that we can shine through these challenges. So yay, we're going to go from good news to even better news. We can make an important impact, especially at a challenging time. You all probably remember who you were working with, what you were doing when the events of 9/11 happened, like I do. I happened to be a second grade teacher at Mount Williams Elementary during that year. And I will always remember my colleagues, my students, their families. That was such a significant time in our nation's history. And I just think that in those moments, the impact that we can have and the relationships that we can build maybe matter even more. So we can't always choose or control our circumstances, but we can certainly control the environment and set the tone for the climate in our classroom. And as I said, we heard yesterday, and I think we all know this, you all are on the front lines and playing the primary role in building student success and retention as instructors. GPTIs and faculty. So it's in the classroom where the lives are impacted and the magic happens. So let's get going on what we can do better. So how can we make this new normal? We've heard that a trillion times. I'm sure we're all a little sick of it. How can we make it work for ourselves and for our students? So the purpose today is that I want to share some powerful tools that I found for working effectively and reaching learners regardless of modality. And also, my goal is that you will walk away with new techniques and practical ideas that you can take into your classes immediately and apply. So let's start with this question. What do we work to establish from the first day in our classes, whether it's online or face-to-face? And just out of curiosity, have some of you all taught hybrid courses before, or will this be, and hybrid as well? So if you've taught in a hybrid environment as well, what are things we try to establish first thing?
I send like a welcome email, and then I always make it really clear that I'm approachable, and communication is really important in hybrid courses because we won't meet online. And I send them like little reminders for, assignment due or anything. Sometimes even over communication, and I encourage it, and I feel like students also then email you because it's difficult otherwise to communicate with them.
I'm so glad you said that. One of the things that the nurse that called and spoke to my son suggested is that he reach out to his teachers at Lubbock High. He send them an email and say, I'm feeling a little anxious and I just want you to know that. So you doing that proactively for your students, I think is hugely important. So just a quick email even today. I'm so glad that you're in my class. I can't wait to get started on Monday. Here are a few things that you may need to know. And Suzanne, this is a good time to talk about your session this afternoon. Suzanne's going to teach at 3 o'clock about things to do on the first day of class. Prior to the first day of class, it might be good to contact students, especially if you're going to be in a face-to-face class, and say, here are some things that you can be expecting. So if you are available at 3 this afternoon, it would be great to tune in and hear about some of those things. And if not, of course, they will be recorded and you can watch over the weekend. But absolutely, I love that idea of reaching out and setting the tone that is welcoming and approachable right off the bat. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Doss. Anyone else? We talk a lot about a community of learners, and I want to, let's see here. I'm having a hard time. I see everyone over on the side, but the chat, I was going to put an article in the chat, and I'm for some reason not seeing that. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I'm sending everyone an article link, and when you have time, maybe sometime this weekend, you can take a look at it. It's an opinion piece from a professor at Yale University about student relationships and their quality and importance. We want to have that authentic sense of engagement. And when I think about students being engaged or not engaged, I am guilty. I will tell you that I grew up in the 80s, and I love a good 80s movie every now and then. So this is just going to be just strictly for fun. But when I think of engagement or lack thereof, I sometimes think about this particular scene. And Erica, I'm going to stop. But Erica and I went over this, how it would go smoothly. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to go to the other, oh yes, share my computer sound.
Yep.
And then I'm going to now go to share my other screen. Thank you all for bearing with me here. Okay. It'll be worth it. Okay.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone, the Great Depression, passed the, anyone, a tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone, raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will.
Okay. So we probably all can remember that and maybe relate to that a bit. We've all probably seen those looks on students' faces. So we want authentic engagement, not that blank look and blank stare, and the building of positive relationships, because those are going to be directly tied to student outcomes, regardless of the mode of delivery. So we often at the very beginning try to set the tone, get to know our students. And so I wanted to give you an idea, if you in thinking about how we can build relationships and authentic communication, and also maybe tie in a little bit. It feels a little strange, I think, to just jump right into our content and not acknowledge that we're, students are feeling the heaviness of the time. So I have a graphic here, a rose, a thorn, and a bud. So that might be a great way to start your introductions for your first day of class, whether it's on a discussion board, whether it's via Zoom, or whether it's in a face-to-face. A rose, something good and positive that has come out of their time away, quarantine time. A thorn, something that really stinks. And maybe they miss live music, maybe they miss, I'm a big hugger, so I think that's one of the hardest things. It has been for me. And then something that they're looking forward to when all of this is over and when we're back to precedented time. So that's just one idea that you could perhaps use. And I think something that would be really great, especially on a discussion board, is for students to see that, oh, I'm not alone in feeling that, this is one of the hardest parts, or something I have enjoyed maybe a little more quiet time because I'm more introverted or something like that. So I think not only will they feel commonality with you as you share, but they'll feel that authentic relationship with one another as well. So let's move on. We don't want to, as I said, be tone deaf to what's going on, but it's easy to be that way right now because body language and facial expressions are very hard to read. If you're in an online only course, I don't want to be tone deaf to the fact that it's impossible. You don't see your students unless you do asynchronous elements. So when we think about serving our student population at challenging times, we want to remain calm. I love a good acronym. So I think communicating and checking in often. When I think about that Ferris Bueller clip, students have this blank look and the teacher just keeps right on like nothing's going on. So when we see that in a face-to-face class, or we sense that when we're delivering via Blackboard Collaborate, it might be worth it sometimes just to say, let's stop for a minute, let's do a check-in. Let's see how everyone's doing. Something that we did when I was delivering emergency remote instruction in the spring is I had a student email me and say, how are you dealing with stress? Mrs. Ziegner, how are you coping? And so we had a 5-minute, or probably it turned about into 10, it was my Tuesday, Thursday class, where we shared, if we wanted to, things that we were doing that were helpful. So I brought a pitcher of fruit water that we were making. It sounds a little silly, but my kids were home and I was home, and we were trying to pay really close attention to our health and well-being. And so my daughter said, we're not drinking enough water. So we decided every day to put someone different in charge of making like different flavored water. So some days we do like lemon cucumber, spa water is what we called it. So I held up my pitcher and just said, this is something that we look forward to every day. It's a surprise. Someone different is in charge. it was really impactful to hear how people were coping. And what grew out of that is a lot of people started talking about their pets. So we ended up sending in pictures, screenshots of us holding our pets. And that was something that I shared with not only the class, but with the department. And it ended up being on our social media. So I think for that day, anyway, that was as important as anything else we covered. How are we coping? And that was pretty close to the beginning of quarantine. Acknowledging feelings, admitting that we're feeling anxious and frustrated, and acknowledging that they do too. Kind of letting things go and letting go of the way that we've always done it. That's a big challenge for me right now in my face-to-face classes, because I'm thinking, so often I used to say, turn to your neighbor and talk about this topic for 5 minutes. Can we still do that? I think that we can, and there will be some ways, but we may have to do it in different ways. And then I was thinking, well, they could pass each other notes, and then, oh gosh, then they're both touching the paper. All of these things kind of spiral out of control. We think we have one idea or one problem solved. The bottom line is it won't look the way that it used to look, but we can be creative. And who knows, students may have a better idea than I do about how we can make these small group conversations work. And then making it meaningful and making it matter to them. We have to really concentrate right now on what's most relevant and meaningful, don't we? Because there's so much information out there, not only students in their classes, but just all of the information that's being shared in media. We've got some media and comm folks here, so you all know exactly what I'm talking about, I know. So active learning opportunities. We want to be sure that students are still actively engaged. Students must be actively involved in their own learning experiences for them to be meaningful. So I always try to remember these two questions. What are we learning, and why is it important? Some of you, I think, have heard this story before, but when I was actually teaching in K-12, I had a principal once come in and do a walkthrough, and I noted that she stayed a little longer, and I continued to teach, and she went up to some students and she was talking to them individually. And then when she left, I went up to one of my most dependable ones and said, can you tell me what Mrs. Andrews was asking you? And she said, 2 questions. What are we learning? What are you learning, and why is it important? And it took everything inside me not to say to that student, and what did you say to her? I didn't want to put a child under that kind of pressure, but I noted in that moment that that's a question that students need to be, 2 questions that students need to be able to answer. Have you ever felt as a faculty member that you knew what you wanted to teach, you knew what the goals were, but that you maybe failed to share that? And then also failed to share why it matters, why is it meaningful? So I think that is something that we all need to be focused on. And also the question, did I teach it or did they learn it? That is so completely different. We can certainly cover many topics, but is there really a grasp of what the concept is? So for a moment, and Erica, I wanted to be fancy and put us in Blackboard discussion groups, but then I got overwhelmed this morning and I thought that's just too much. So maybe another time. So rather than, I would love to do this in a small group discussion, but perhaps another time, let's do this as a whole group. How did active learning have to change when you suddenly went to emergency remote instruction? If you were here in the spring. I know some people are brand new to Texas Tech.
In my class, I can kind of hear feedback, sorry.
Yeah, Mitzi, I think it's because
yes,
you got to do that one click.
That's one click. So do I need to stop sharing?
So stop sharing and then go, and now it should have stopped.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's good.
And then when
Okay,
you come
sorry.
back on, if you share your PowerPoint again, just make sure that sharing your computer sound isn't selected.
Okay. Oh, yes, there we go. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Is that better, Ashley?
Yeah, that was good. Sorry.
Okay.
And that's good to know too, because that's definitely going to happen to me at some point for sure.
Yes.
I was actually a TA for my advisor who was awesome, but we do a flip class. And then the second half of the semester, we do a simulation. So we actually had to do the simulation on in breakout rooms. It worked not terribly, but it definitely wasn't its best. Kelly Anderson and I are both teaching digital marketing this semester, and we'll be doing a simulation. So we've kind of changed it to have them doing an individual simulation, which is not ideal, I think, in my opinion. I'd prefer them to work in groups, but we're working with what we got right now. But breakout rooms was definitely a super great feature.
And it's nice, Erica has taught about breakout rooms several times last week and this week. And it is nice to know that, you know, while you can't be everywhere all at the same time, you can still monitor, you can still be a part of that team's discussion. It's really a great tool and very useful in this situation. So yeah, that's great. And Ashley, how many times have we said to ourselves, it's not ideal, but we're making it work. It's not the way we wish it was, but, you know, I think we can all still look at our, you know, the main thing is to look at those learning outcomes and to say, are we still accomplishing that, even though it's not exactly the way we would want it to look? How will we continue to change with, you know, this is kind of what I brought up just a moment ago, social distancing, in a face-to-face class or a hybrid class. If you do value that, get together in a small group and complete this, you know, quick ride or complete this activity or just discuss how you're processing and what you're learning. How do you think we can still accomplish some of those things with the protocols in place that we're going to have? It's going to be challenging. Any ideas? Anyone?
I don't have any ideas, but this is why I actually requested online, because I was nervous in that face-to-face environment. I wouldn't be able to replicate that as easily, ironically, as just going online and doing breakout rooms and doing those activities, because it's just so fundamental to their learning that they have those small group activities and just my philosophy. So I am super curious to hear if others have ideas, because I've learned them.
Me too. I'm hopeful that I'll gain some good ideas too. I want to be a learner on this slide as well. My plan is to see if, you know, even though we are distanced, if we could still have, you know, masks on, turn to your partner, it just will be a little bit louder. But the challenge might be, you know, I'm talking very loudly so you can hear me and you're doing the same, and then all of the conversations around us. That is one thing that I do worry about, but I still don't, I don't want to give that up, Keely. I don't know if you're feeling that way. I don't want to give up that, you know, take a moment and talk to someone, because it builds relationships in your class. So my plan is to try with distancing and masks, if we could still have that discussion element.
If the noise level, sorry, if the noise level is a problem, you may want to think about having people use their cell phones. Right, you can just have everybody call each other. I mean, you can have something like a WhatsApp or something where it's like it doesn't cost them. They're all going to be on campus, so Wi-Fi is going to be there. So it could just be that way. They, you know, people don't have to be as loud.
That's a great idea.
They would have to share. They would have to. I mean, you may want to find something where they don't have to share phone numbers with people that they don't.
But I like WhatsApp, because that is just that's like calling through a messenger system. So
yeah, but it's still their actual phone
still
number.
Their actual
would be,
number.
So,
Yeah.
But there must be some other options out there.
Sorry, I was just going to say, you can download an app for the Skype for Business link, and then the calling there is associated with your Skype for Business phone number and not your TTU and your email. So that is a workaround for that.
And will students have that same? They have a different number?
Yes, because it's associated with your email address. I believe it works for everyone.
Great. That's a great idea. See, oh yay. So we did get some good ideas for that. And I do love that idea, because, you know, we could talk on our devices a lot more at a, you know, more appropriate volume than we would be able to with distancing.
Students are only assigned a phone number if they are employees of the university.
Okay.
If they're not employees at the university, then they're not going to have a university assigned phone number. So just FYI as you think about that.
Thank you.
But can't the app still connect to well, we can troubleshoot that with somebody,
Yeah.
maybe one of our
Yeah.
student workers, and see.
And if we think of things, we may follow up with an email to this group afterwards. If you all would do the same, send me any great ideas that you think of or come across, and let's not let that conversation stop, throughout the semester, because, heaven forbid, if we are still in a situation where we may be doing this in the spring, I think any good ideas that we can get would be fantastic to share and move forward. Oh, got a chat here. Yes, I can certainly make the slides available as well. Okay, so how will we make it work? We stay tuned, to be continued, right? we'll see. Making things meaningful and personal. And I'm going to talk for just a second about some techniques maybe for online and hybrid. We always need to be helping students I think we know this, but being intentional about helping students understand the why behind the what for their tasks. And Suzanne, when I think about this, I think about how it relates to transparency in, having them really understand the purpose. So specific criteria for success and feedback on assignments. So if you are in an online class, one of the things that I work so hard to do is to give students very specific feedback, and not just constructive feedback. Sometimes it's easy to say, this was a little too brief, or, I was looking for this or that. But when they do something or say something in an assignment or a reflection that's very, meaningful and profound, I think it's great to have them to say, I'd never thought about it that way. I really enjoyed your perspective. I really am happy that you shared that. That was a connection that I've never thought of. Students, I think, regardless of the age level that you're working with, really love knowing that I thought of something the professor never thought of. I saw something in a different way. Watching for new and relevant material that we can add to our classes each semester based on what their real life experiences are, and helping them link to real life examples. I have a couple of slides here. Some courses that I've taught often are a prenatal infant development course and a child and adolescent guidance course. So in both of those classes, I'm asking students to think about infant development and positive guidance techniques, and many of them are not parents. Some of them are, and but it can be a little abstract and a little difficult. So in the prenatal infant development class, we talk about parents' struggles to bond with their baby sometimes. And we often talk about, maybe postpartum depression that moms might feel. But I found a great blog on the Today Show blog a few years ago about a father who was really struggling to bond. And so I had students read that blog, my online students, and then I had them respond to him based on some of the things that we've learned in our class. What advice would you give to a parent, in particular to this dad who is struggling to bond with this baby? So are they processing the information and using it? Yes, but it's not just, give some tips that you would give, but for this situation in particular. We talk in the guidance class about physical punishment and the impact of physical punishment. And what I found over the years is that many students will say things like, physical punishment is okay. I survived it. I turned out all right. And they don't think too deeply about all the different layers that can, and what the meaning can be. So this is a real life example of an NFL player who actually was arrested for abuse after physically punishing his son. And the reaction was, this is the same thing that I grew up with. I didn't think, I wasn't intending to hurt him. This was just how I was disciplined and raised. And so it gives them an opportunity to see a real life example. So if they can read about something that has truly happened and apply the information that they're learning, it's so much more meaningful than just maybe some type of an abstract summative assignment. So those are just some ideas. High and appropriate expectations, a routine, whether it be online or hybrid or face-to-face, that is so helpful to both you and them knowing what to expect. And especially with online learning, I have found that having consistent windows of time that modules or content areas are open and specific times that assignments are submitted can be really important, and truthfully as important for me as the instructor as it is for the students. So I typically, when I teach an online course, give students a 10-day window into that content. So it opens the Friday before it will be due a week from Monday, if that makes sense. So they have the weekend, they have an entire week, they have another weekend, and then the assignments for my class are due at 1 p.m. on Mondays. It seems like a weird time, doesn't it? I used to have noon on Monday as a due date and time, and I had a single mom many years ago reach out to me via email and say, I'm working so hard to do well in this class. I very often end up editing my assignment during my lunch hour at work on the day it's due. Could you make it 1 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock? Sure. Absolutely, that works for me. And some people do midnight. It doesn't matter as long as you have a time that is consistent. Now, if 1 p.m. on Monday doesn't work, students clearly can turn it in Sunday night before. It doesn't have to be then, but it's very helpful to them to know what to expect. And then my pledge to them is that I get back to them with grading and feedback prior to the time that the next assignment is due. And that's helpful to students because they know within a week I'll hear back about my assignment. And it's helpful to me as an instructor because we are all in that same content at the same time, if that makes sense. Just like in a face-to-face class, you're with a certain chapter or certain content during a certain week, and then we build on that and move on to the next content. The balancing act right now of high standards with grace during difficult times. I feel like we need to become right now as flexible as we possibly can be. Think about perhaps giving students online, and I know it's difficult to think about giving up a week, but I so often, and I bet you all do too, have students reach out to me and say, I haven't gotten the book yet. I'm not able to complete the first assignment. And guys, there could be real financial issues tied to COVID or to other situations as well. It's sometimes easy to say, well, gosh, I maybe sent out an email in advance, or they've known what the text is. They may not physically or financially be able to get that text as soon as you want them to have it. So I would say spending that first week talking about transparency and expectations, setting the tone, building relationships can be a win-win in that situation. You're giving them a little bit of extra time and grace to get that text, get the first chapter or chapters read, and get prepared for the assignment. Tell them, show them, and explain what you're expecting in your assignments and why it's important. I was going to share with you an announcement that I share in my online classes that's up from the first time that they can access the material, and it's the title is Making Your Reflection Assignments the Best They Can Be. As I was looking over it, I thought I could improve on that. What I want to do and what I plan to do now is I'm going to go to our recording studio here in the TLPDC. I'm not going to type that. I'm going to tell them that. I'm going to record myself saying, when I give you a 1-page limit and you turn in a 1/4 page, that makes me worry that either you prepared poorly and you didn't get to the assignment until the last minute, or you haven't put in the time and thought in detail. That's important. And I try to explain to them that it's not just that I'm glancing to see a 1/2 page, a 1/3 page. If you have 1 page to tell me everything that you're reflecting on and what you've learned this week, and you turn in something very small, I have no I guess, choice but to believe that maybe you don't understand it well, or that you didn't put in the time and effort. And helping students understand in an online class environment, those weekly reflections are the only way that I can gauge week to week how you're doing and what you're learning. So that's why it's so important. And then I think Suzanne would say too, with the TILT framework that she's worked so well and so hard on, it's okay to show students exactly what you're expecting. I think sometimes we're afraid and we say, oh gosh, if we show them, then they won't do the hard work and do the processing. Not true. I think if they know what to expect, then they are more willing to do the work that is that you're expecting. So showing them maybe not something that's exactly the same as what you've assigned or what you're asking, but this is what a strong assignment that's thorough and thoughtful and well prepared looks like. And this is what I'm hoping to see. COVID has put students in their, as we said, and their families in chaos. These are uncertain and unsettling times, and I don't think you'll regret the grace that you give. I'm going to give you an example of something that happened in my class this summer. I typically am very transparent about the fact that I don't allow students to take tests after the testing period, for academic integrity reasons. I happen to have a student this summer who had been in one of my face-to-face classes prior, and it was actually in the fall or maybe the spring of last year, so it was a normal semester. He was really a sharp student, very dedicated, worked really hard, and as you said, Suzanne, with your student, he fell off the radar completely, and he did not take exam 2, and without taking an exam, it's very difficult to make anything higher than possibly a D in the class. So he never reached out to me. I didn't hear from him. So I happened to reach out to him, and he said, I have the virus and I didn't want to share it because I didn't want people to think that I wasn't careful. He was worried about the judgment that he might get from, he, is a frontline worker. He works in a hospital. I said, I've been so sick, I can hardly even keep track of what day it is. So I did miss the test. But I also know you, I've taken your courses, I know your expectations, and I didn't want to ask for special treatment. And again, you guys, that hurt my heart a bit because he wasn't asking for special treatment. He was in a very dire situation. So reaching out and giving that grace, does my syllabus say I don't give late exams? Yes, it absolutely does. In this situation, was I willing to reset that exam for him? 100% yes. So and do I regret that? Not at all. So giving more grace rather than less right now, I think is an okay thing for us to do. Again, guys, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. My sister was a big music fan, has made me one. So when I say we are family, I'm going to think of Sister Sledge all day long. Community we want to build that community of learners, but it's never felt, I think, more elusive and at the same time more significant. At the new faculty orientation yesterday, we're seeing people coming in and, they've got all of these things on their minds and they're sitting at tables and we've got masks on, and it's just, they're all in it together and so are we, but it's also really easy to feel very far apart right now with just the way things are. So we're going to have to use creative methods and think about how we'll build relationships and rapport, not only with students, but maybe with colleagues in our department if we're new to a department as well. Think, pair, share activities, breakout groups in Blackboard Collaborate can be really, really helpful. Giving tips for managing assignments and stress, and then taking the team approach. Again, talking about what your expectations are, maybe even helping your students establish an action plan. It may seem obvious, but they may not know what are the steps, what are the first steps that I'll need to take to make this assignment the best it can be. Assuming best intentions. So when a student in your online class turns in an assignment that is way below your expectations, when you're giving, I'm not saying that you won't give them honest feedback, but saying to them, it seemed like maybe you didn't understand, or I'm a little concerned about this, approaching it in that way. And then making sure that we're measuring success using a variety of different methods, not just one way to be successful in our classes. Do you see what I see? The perspective, and perspective is so key. I'm running out of time, but I was going to show a clip of, some of you may be familiar with the research of Piaget, you have a child who is looking at the two glasses and saying, you know, is this one larger? Is this one larger? Or does this have more content? Just because it's not the way we see it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. So listening to students and getting their perspective and their feedback, working to understand their points of view and being willing to hear their ideas. They may not be exactly where we want them to be, but that's okay. We're teachers, we're educators. We can help scaffold and fix that, right? So looking at, as we close today, the big picture and the big view of why we're doing what we're doing and the opportunities in teaching during a time such as this. I think especially in an online or maybe hybrid environment, and who knows, students may be very willing in a face-to-face class, you know, based on what we're all feeling. I think it's an honor to hear a part of a student's story and to be present as they are learning and growing. To get to see that happen, it sounds a little corny, but I saw such a change in my students when we did emergency remote instruction, from where we were at the very beginning when everything was normal to when we went to emergency remote to the end. It was just an honor to behold their growth and their perspective. I think this whole situation has given us all a different attitude, getting to versus having to. I am so excited to be in a class with students on Monday. It's going to be difficult. There are going to be challenges, but to get to be able to do that again, I was preparing this morning and I got like almost butterflies in my stomach. So excited to get to do that again after such a long time of not being able to. We have this opportunity right now to observe academic and real life lessons happening all at the same time. And that's, besides being a parent, I don't know where else we get to see things like that happen. So it's really a neat thing. And being able to be there for students and help them feel safe and significant right now when their world has been absolutely rocked, that's a privilege. So I want us to close today thinking about the culture and the feeling that students will leave your class with. So I'm going to share with you, I was looking back on my spring evaluations, and I just want you to look at some of the words that stand out. Not one person really talks about the content of the class. Kindness and checking to see how they were doing. The heart and the caring. And I love that the student says on the second one, even when our world changed overnight. The transition was smooth. And you guys, I didn't feel like it was all that smooth. There were days that I thought, well, gosh, that could have gone better. Making the classroom feel like a family. And I love that third one, everyone helped each other. It wasn't just me helping them. I think they got the sense that they helped me a great deal as well. Having students feel like you are there for them. And the fourth one, or the fifth one, makes me laugh. Everything changed all of a sudden, and it would have thrown people for a loop. I'm sure it threw her, but it never seemed like it. I felt more thrown for a loop than I've ever felt in my life as a teacher. So I'm happy that didn't show. And I'm sure some days it did. The last one is my favorite, having consistency, not only for academics, but also for my heart. Oh my gosh, reconnecting with classmates and giving us a space to feel like things are back to normal for the moment. I do agree with that student that hour and 20 minutes or 50 minutes that I spent with them in instruction, that we still met from 9:30 to 10:50 every Tuesday and Thursday. That was one of my favorite hour and 20-minute periods of the whole day, because it did feel like we were doing something that was normal. So as we think about, and here we are at 12 o'clock. I'm so sorry, I meant to end so that we could ask some questions. But as we finish up and think about going into our first week and beyond, please do reach out and share good ideas. Also share struggles. I don't know that there's anything we can necessarily do for one another, but sometimes it's just nice for someone to say, that must have been really difficult, or I'm sorry. I know you wish that could have gone better, and so do I. I want to wish you all the best in your first weeks and days of class, and tell you how much I'm looking forward to working with you in different capacities here at the TLPDC. So thank you all for taking the time. I know everybody's so busy and stressed right now, and I wish you all the best for a great semester.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Mitzi.
Thank you. Happy first week, everyone.
Mhm.